Alberta and Saskatchewan seem to be arming up, and the rest of Canada is finally starting to notice.
Alberta's north, the meetings are going on everywhere. Now there's one, and this is how we keep it alive. This is how we network. This is how this movement sustains. It's not just a react.
The announcement is real, and the date is set. 2026 is when the West decides its own course. Across Alberta and Saskatchewan, the talk has shifted from frustration to action. You can hear it in town halls and see it in signature drives. Every policy from Ottawa now meets silence, not negotiation. The paperwork is being written, the movement is organized, and the message is clear. The West is preparing to leave, not to argue.
Alberta and Canada are both worth fighting for, and that fight is with an out-of-control federal government in Ottawa that sees Alberta and all provinces as its subordinate rather than its partner.
When only 24% of Albertans think Ottawa treats them fairly, the term federation sounds like a bad joke. 25% in Saskatchewan feel the same way. That's half the national average. Ottawa keeps repeating the same script about unity and shared prosperity, but the people footing the bill aren't buying the tagline anymore. You can't talk fairness to provinces that pump the economy and still get lectured about pipelines, emissions, and carbon guilt. The national average at 52% only proves one thing: fairness stops somewhere east of Manitoba.
That Alberta could become the 51st state of the United States of America, low taxes, not have to deal with all of the green energy weird policies that's hurting farmers in Alberta and everything else. So what do you make of the latest moves?
The system got a shock when Alberta passed Bill 54. It didn't trend for long because the mainstream press treats every provincial reform like a footnote, but it changed the math overnight. That single bill dropped the threshold for citizen-initiated referendums from roughly 600,000 signatures down to about 177,000. That's not paperwork, that's a loaded trigger sitting on the table. For the first time, a 2026 WEXIT vote isn't fantasy, it's logistics. And in politics, logistics matter more than slogans.
Or if it decides to become incorporated into the United States, I think Americans would welcome that, because this is an energy-rich province that contains most of the economic activity of Canada.
Western alienation has been around longer than most of our premiers, but now it's hitting Quebec-level numbers. The Aristotle Foundation found that prairie support for separation sits around 33% in Saskatchewan and 36.5% in Alberta. Those are Quebec-era figures. The difference is that Quebec got decades of negotiation and constitutional sweeteners. The West gets federal silence. When that silence keeps ringing, people start planning their own exit strategy. The real divide now is simple: builders versus blockers. The builders are the provinces sitting on wealth the rest of the country lives off. Alberta has one of the biggest oil and gas reserves in the world. Saskatchewan owns the planet's most valuable potash deposits. Together, they're resource royalty. Then there are the blockers: Ottawa's emission caps, Bill C-69, and the tanker ban that turned Canada's energy policy into a bureaucratic hostage situation. 1/3 of Albertans who already support leaving say they'd reconsider if pipelines were finally built or those caps disappeared. That's not speculation, that's a confession from the data itself.
Alberta, Canada, is one step closer to breaking up with Canada. The province is seeing a tidal wave of pro-independence momentum, not fringe internet chatter, by the way, but a full-on political groundswell backed by voter support, legislative changes, and active referendum planning.
Danielle Smith plays the role of the polite rebel. She swears she doesn't want separation, yet she writes the rule book for it. That's not confusion, that's leverage. She built the path, set the date, and left the door wide open for a 2026 referendum if Ottawa keeps stonewalling. It's the political version of holding a match over a leaky gas line. She doesn't have to say she'll light it. Everyone knows she can.
Furious about this at a town hall meeting and saying, why can't we lower taxes anymore in Alberta? Why can't we spend more money on the public school system? Because Ottawa is extorting $25 billion a year from the taxpayers of Alberta. And when she...
Trust in the Federation has collapsed. Every poll says the same thing. Only half of Western Canadians even believe a referendum could succeed. 3 in 4 expect it to fail. That's what happens when a country spends decades convincing its economic engine that it's replaceable. People stop trusting the engine, and they start tuning a new one. The mood has shifted from whispers about autonomy to a loud conversation about independence. I keep hearing the same line in every town hall and radio call-in. We're done being taken for granted. That line has become a rallying cry, and it's turning politics into something combustible. The Alberta Prosperity Project isn't a group of angry Facebook commenters. It's a structured organization running signature drives with real funding and real membership lists. Their target is 2026. Their confidence is surgical. When Maclean's called Alberta the most renegade province, they didn't mean rebellious teenagers. They meant a province quietly collecting the paperwork for its own divorce.
October 25th, yeah, Saturday, 4 in the afternoon in Edmonton at the legislature. And you can get on buses, hey, ride with a bunch of other independence-minded people. It's a great time, it's great networking, it's getting out, and we want to see.
The benchmark everyone whispers about is Quebec 1976, the year a province realized it could hold the rest of the country hostage by simply asking a question. The West isn't asking for a better seat at the table anymore, it's asking where the exit is. Polls that used to hover at 20% have jumped into the 30s, some hitting 36. That's the level where governments start making contingency plans. The difference now is timing. Alberta and Saskatchewan signaling an official intent to WEXIT in 2026 turned the movement from protest into blueprint. The insiders know it, the bureaucrats know it, the markets know it. It's no longer a threat, it's preparation. Money drives every revolution, and this one's no different. Alberta sends more to Ottawa than it ever gets back. Billions flow east and come back as scolding lectures about climate virtue. That imbalance is what fuels this new independence push. The West calls itself the engine of Canada, and it's tired of being treated like the exhaust pipe. Every check cut to Ottawa feels like financing its own suppression. You can't build loyalty on tax receipts that never return.
If you don't know, that's when Ottawa extorts money from so-called have provinces to dispense it to so-called have not provinces. And
the resource advantage is staggering. Alberta's oil and gas output alone ranks among the top in the world. Saskatchewan's potash is a global necessity. Together, they control the raw materials that feed energy, food, and fertilizer markets. That isn't regional wealth, that's global leverage. The people here know it. The investors know it. The federal capital crowd pretends not to, but their balance sheets tell another story. They're terrified of what happens when a region that owns the commodities decides it no longer wants to share. Polls show a clear link between policy reform and unity. 1 in 3 Westerners ready to vote leave say they would reconsider if Ottawa allowed new pipelines or lifted emission caps. The data doesn't lie. The country's integrity could be bought back with infrastructure, but pride in the capital keeps the pen from signing. That pride costs billions, and it's costing the Federation its patience. Every stalled project adds another voter to the separation column.
This is, and I was just going to say, this is the best argument for separation that both Alberta and Saskatchewan have. So just doing that math, over 50 years, that's $250,000 per person that is leaving Alberta and going straight into Ottawa pockets.
The business community has started reading the writing on the wall. The same Maclean's feature that mocked Alberta's renegade streak admitted the fundamentals are stronger now than any past separatist movement. They're right. This isn't nostalgia for 1980s bumper stickers, it's economics. The debt ratios, the export data, and the investor trends all line up in Alberta's favor. The oil and gas sector still brings in hundreds of billions in GDP contribution while the rest of the country debates solar panels that don't work in February. Investors like certainty, and right now, separation looks more predictable than federal policy. Every number points to the same conclusion. The West feels ready. It isn't chasing fantasy. It's looking at budgets, legislation, and polling data and concluding that 2026 is a viable exit window. That's what official intent really means. Not a flag planted, but a clock started. When 36% of a province says it wants a vote when the law drops the threshold to 177,000 signatures, and when the country's richest provinces start writing their own destiny, that's not talk. That's history preparing to file the paperwork.
fed up, we've had enough, we want the hell out, and we vote to form a separate country.
I keep hearing people say, oh, Alberta can't legally do it. They said the same thing about Brexit, and they said the same thing about Quebec until it nearly tore the country apart. The law is never clear until someone decides to test it. Alberta already lit the fuse with Bill 54. That small amendment inside the Election Statutes Act changed everything. It cut the threshold for citizen-initiated referendums to about 10% of the previous voter turnout, roughly 177,000 signatures. That's the size of a few packed hockey arenas. I've seen online petitions hit that number before breakfast. So now, for the first time in history, a legal WEXIT vote is not a dream. It's a matter of signatures. When you make democracy that accessible, you don't just invite public opinion, you weaponize it. Saskatchewan didn't sit back either. They passed the Saskatchewan First Act, which basically said, we'll handle our own jurisdiction, thanks. It's polite language wrapped around a constitutional jab. It gives the province authority over natural resources and asserts that local control comes before Ottawa's interpretation. It's a message, not a negotiation. Saskatchewan may not officially back separation right now, but it's building the legal scaffolding to decide when it's ready. You don't pour concrete unless you plan to raise something big.
Thing being done in terms of pipelines in the country. When he claimed to be the guy who's here for a crisis and the guy who's going to solve everything, and there's no pipelines being brought forward or even so much as entertained, that separation sentiment is going to continue growing. And you heard Danielle Smith say here,
The numbers tell the legal story too. Even if a referendum is held, 52% in Alberta say they definitely vote to stay. Only 19% say they definitely vote to leave. That sounds like comfort for Ottawa until you realize that these are the pre-campaign numbers. Campaigns shift the ground. Ask Quebec in 1995, where the no side went from easy victory to a nail-biter that ended by a hair. If half the province already wants a referendum, the idea itself has legitimacy. You don't get 50% of any population supporting a vote unless something is broken deep inside the system. There's one obstacle that makes everyone sweat: the treaties. Indigenous communities in both Alberta and Saskatchewan made it clear they won't accept a separation that sidesteps their rights, and their right to be wary. The federal government built its entire constitutional foundation on those agreements. Break them, and the entire argument for legality collapses. Every lawyer in Ottawa knows that, which is why they keep pretending the West will calm down on its own. They'd rather not see a courtroom filled with chiefs, premiers, and constitutional scholars arguing about sovereignty. But that day is coming. A movement this large always hits the legal stage sooner or later.
The time for talking is over. It's time to act. Alberta is getting fed up, and we are seeing it is getting legitimately closer that they would join the US. And again, I used to think that this was very unlikely.
The politics behind this are a different game altogether. 7 out of 10 people who want to leave say they'd change their mind if a conservative government took over in Ottawa. That's volatility at its finest. Loyalty shifts like the wind. It means this movement isn't about ideology, it's about results. When people say they'll stay in the country only if a particular federal government takes charge, that's not patriotism, that's conditional membership. It's like a marriage where one partner keeps checking the door handle just to make sure it still opens. The province itself is split right down the middle. 51% support holding the referendum, 49% oppose it. That's a statistical coin toss with dynamite underneath. The opposition to the vote is louder, but the drive behind the yes side is relentless. The people pushing for it aren't doing it for debate points, they're doing it for history. Every poll, every protest, every petition is pushing closer to that line where talk ends and paperwork begins.
It is crazy that we are supporting the lifestyles of the rich and famous over there in Quebec with our hard work and ambition. It is ridiculous.
Political structure is forming fast. The Republican Party of Alberta, which rose from the ashes of the old Buffalo Party, already has over 24,000 members. That's not a chat group, that's an organization with membership cards, funding, and goals. You can laugh at it now, but every political revolution starts with a party people mocked. Remember, the Bloc Québécois started as a few MPs kicked out of Parliament. Look how far that went. Alberta's Republican Party is the nucleus of what comes next. When structure meets sentiment, you get momentum. Timing could not be sharper. A 2026 referendum collides with provincial elections, federal politics, and national fatigue. Every election cycle magnifies division, and every speech from Ottawa sounds more like an echo from a disconnected capital. The date itself has become a countdown. Every protest, every rally, every I Am Alberta banner leads to that same year. That's when the West stops asking and starts deciding. You can already feel it in the tone of town halls and radio shows. The country is holding its breath. Of course, there are risks, there always are. The biggest one is the chokehold on energy routes. British Columbia and Quebec can block pipelines faster than Ottawa can hold a press conference. 4 out of 5 people leaning toward independence say that if they're blocked again, their support for separation hardens. That's what happens when the arteries of the economy get squeezed by politics. Energy is not a provincial luxury, it's the bloodstream of the Federation. If Ottawa or its provincial allies cut it off, they'll discover how fast blood pressure can rise on the prairies. The Indigenous question will decide legitimacy. Many First Nations leaders are warning that any separation ignoring treaty rights will be illegal under both Canadian and international law. They hold moral ground and legal precedent. No referendum can erase that. Any serious movement toward sovereignty will have to negotiate, not dictate. Alberta's loudest activists keep promising fair talks with Indigenous nations after a vote. The problem is, history makes those promises hard to believe. If the West wants independence that stands up in court and on the world stage, it needs Indigenous inclusion from day one.